For a long time, your success feels earned and stable. You're producing, people respond, and things move when you push on them. And from inside that experience, it's easy to believe three things are true: that your influence is real, that your business can grow without breaking you, and that the value you bring is clearly yours. But at the highest levels, those three don't automatically stay true, because more of what makes you successful can exist outside of you. I was a top-performing wealth advisor, leader, and executive in the wealth management industry for 23 consecutive years, building and running multi-billion-dollar businesses. So what are you going to learn today? 1, where enforced alignment gets mistaken for real influence. 2, what to examine to see if your growth is capped by your own design. 3, why your business starts to feel heavy well before it actually breaks. And finally, 4, what makes your value distinct from others. Whether your success actually lasts comes down to 3 things most advisors never separate. First, whether people move because of you or because something above them requires it. Second, whether your growth is capped because everything still needs to run through you and you haven't built a way for others to carry that without diluting your quality. And third, whether your results come from what you bring or from what you've inherited. And those 3 determine whether you're actually running your business or just operating inside something that's been working so far. So let's start with influence, because enforced alignment is the easiest one to mistake for your authority. So for you, success isn't challenged while things are working. It's questioned later, when progress depends on movement that doesn't originate with you. And right now, things are moving. You're getting prioritized, your meetings that you ask for get accepted, and your support, it always shows up without resistance. And after a while, that consistency stops feeling like momentum and starts feeling permanent. From inside that seat, it's easy to believe this is influence. But here's the part most people don't slow down to separate. A meaningful portion of what's supporting your success right now sits outside your control. You don't control being as priority on someone else's scorecard or when priorities shift. In many environments, support isn't voluntary. It's enforced above you. Incentives, scorecards, and leadership presence makes cooperation non-optional. And as long as that holds, everything feels steady to you. And the risk is that when success has worked for a long period of time, people assume it will last. Not because it's durable, because it's never been challenged. And I've seen not everybody will be pressured or rewarded for working with you, because your relevance doesn't come from what you offer. It comes from becoming a vital part of how someone else's business operates. And when your involvement strengthens their outcomes and removes risks they didn't want to carry, things move for the right reason. And at that point, alignment stops being the reason things move at all. So here's a few things I want you to test, because this is where things get exposed. And I want you to be precise. What part of your success are you assuming will still keep on working simply because it hasn't stopped yet? Next, check your alignment without ownership. Do people cooperate and everything looks aligned, but when something stalls, no one actually owns restarting it? And if your alignment disappeared tomorrow, no pressure or expectations from above, what would still move without you pushing it? Then there's borrowed priority. Work advances because it fits someone else's focus or aligns with an incentive that has nothing to do with you. And while that whole growth looks like it's yours, but when that lease expires, what happens to your result when this is no longer a priority for anyone else? And what about zero consequence? Agreements exist and heads nod, but once something more important shows up, nothing forces follow through. And when attention shifts, what truly enforces the outcomes and what simply fades away? When nothing enforces it, success isn't owned, it's being carried. Because influence isn't revealed when alignment is present, it's revealed when alignment is gone. And until you can separate what moves because of you from what moves because alignment is enforced above you, your success will stay stable right up until it isn't. Next, let's look at your ability to sustain and grow your success. There's a point where adding more feels heavy. The work gets done and results hold, but every new layer feels like it requires you to personally hold it together. And that weight isn't about workload. It's about how the business is designed to create ownership. And this is about delegation, trust, and capability. It's about where the reasoning lives. What eventually limits growth is centralized reasoning, the logic behind decisions that live in your head, not in the business. And because your value is centralized, everything routes back to you and ownership never fully spreads. The business still works, but it gets heavier every time you add to it. Your priorities are clear, but no one moves until the reasoning is confirmed by you. And any trade-offs only make sense after you explain the logic. It's just designed to depend on you. And that centralized reasoning, it's there to protect quality, but exclusive reasoning prevents ownership. And when reasoning is embedded to the business, others can lead correctly without having to be you. They don't just execute. They understand why they're doing what they're doing. And that multiplies the impact of your value. And this is where you can tell where the business can absorb more of it or when it's at capacity. Let's look at your decision dependency. Decisions are sound, but only happens after you frame the variables. So I want to ask yourself the question, where does work pause until you step in to explain how to think about it? And what about your priority gaps? Goals and direction are clear. But where does momentum stall? Because no one wants to own the next step without your approval. And what about what gets paralyzed? In gray areas, people hesitate even when they have authority. Which trade-offs require you to explain the logic before anyone moves? And finally, your reasoning being locked. You assume protecting value requires keeping your reasoning to yourself. But where would sharing that reasoning allow others to protect the quality for you? And when that logic stays in your head, ownership never leaves it. And if it's all in your head, then it's all on your shoulders. And that's why the business feels heavy long before it stops working for you. And now let's look at the last one, systemic inheritance. The business runs and results keep showing up because you know how things work because you're inside it every day. But when asked to explain why it works, not what you do, your answer takes longer than it should. You'll walk through processes and structure, not the thinking from your own logic. And that's when you notice what you believe was yours isn't fully from your own design. Because most advisors inherit a way of working, how decisions get made and how results show up. And you've learned that setup and line to it. And because it worked, you never had to define it. And when you're asked why something works, the answer isn't a set of principles you own. It's a walkthrough of how the business behaves. And the risk is that the logic behind it lives outside your control and intent. Because if you can't explain why your business works without pointing to the setup around you, you're operating inside it, not running it. You're making decisions, but the thinking behind them isn't yours to shape. And until you understand what's driving results, you're responding inside the business and not directing it. So here's a test. Where does your explanation rely on how it works here instead of your own logic for results? What about the setup? Your results didn't start from a blank page. What parts were established before you had to influence them? What about the scope? Which parts do you understand end to end and which ones work because you've learned to operate within them? Without this separation, your ability to design is an assumption, not a fact. Because if you haven't separated what you designed from what you've inherited, you're not running the business. You're operating inside it. Because fluency can produce results, but design makes them durable. And that difference determines whether success is transferable or conditional. You'll decide whether people align because of your influence or because of external force. You'll decide whether you plateau because ownership never extends beyond how reasoning is held. And you decide whether results come from what you can create or from a setup others can replicate. Because if you don't separate those deliberately, they'll blur. And over time, success turns into something that holds without being expandable, transferable, or fully yours. And the question isn't whether this feels familiar. It's whether you're willing to take responsibility for what drives your success now that you can see clearly. Each week, I break down real strategies behind top performers for wealth advisors and leaders ready to operate at the level they've been built for. This is EliteVate. We'll cut through the fluff, no hype, no theory, just strategy, psychology, and execution. If this hits home, subscribe. You're not just watching and learning. You'll become the model others follow.